the truth. It won't be afraid of the hammer, the flame, or the test that you made.
Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to look at the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. We're going to put them to the test and see if the claims that they make are valid. So if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I'll invite you to follow along with me. If you're studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses, we're going to look at some scriptures and we're going to just think logically what they're saying. Is it valid? Or if you have family members involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm hoping to give you another perspective that can help you and your family to see with what the governing body, what they are saying and the claims they are making, are they valid? So the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, they set the teachings, the policies and the direction that all Jehovah's Witnesses must follow worldwide. If you question the governing body, this can result in you as a Jehovah's Witnesses being cut off from your family and friends. You can be disfellowshipped simply for disagreeing with the governing body. So we can see that it's a difficult issue for many of Jehovah's Witnesses to test because they're afraid. But should you be afraid? Well, let's consider Jesus Christ himself. When Apostle Thomas doubted Jesus' resurrection and said he needed proof, Jesus later invited him to examine the evidence rather than rebuking him harshly or disfellowshipping him. What about John the Baptizer? When he sent his disciples off to Jesus Christ and asked him, "Are you the Messiah or are we to expect someone else?" How did Jesus handle that? Did he rebuke John the Baptizer? No. He said to his disciples, "Come, follow me." He gave a demonstration to prove his claims that he was a Messiah. He healed the sick. Then he said to John's disciples, "Go back now and report to John what you have seen." Now this is from Jesus Christ himself. So if we're allowed to question Jesus Christ and his claims, then why aren't we allowed to question the governing body and their claims? If we look at the nation of Israel at the time of Jesus, we see that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, had built a control system, and it was based on a false identity. That is, a system based on the identity of Moses. They claimed to be directly in line of Moses and Aaron. And so the Pharisees and the Sadducees, we know from the Bible, were misleading people. And they didn't reject God outright. They just repositioned themselves as the chosen leaders that you couldn't question. We see the same pattern with the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, and this should be a problem. So how did Jesus handle this issue? There are many cases in the Bible where Jesus helped us to understand important things. For example, blind guides lead to destruction. A blind man follows another blind man and he walks into a pit. Both will walk into a pit. It will mean destruction for both of them. So therefore, religious leaders can be wrong and we need to question them. Doesn't matter how confident he walks, he could be blind. So we need to question the teachings. At Mark 7, we see clearly that a person's worship can be invalid if it's based on the teachings of human rules and on teachings of men. Jesus said, watch out for false prophets. How? By testing their fruit. Test what they are saying. That's recorded at Matthew 7. Jesus also highlighted in Matthew 23 that religious leaders in his time and in our time can be condemned for closing the doors of truth because they want to hold authority and a power over you. They don't want you to know the truth because if you know the truth, you would get up and leave. They don't want that, so they deliberately keep you in darkness and shut those doors. Make sure that they protect you from the truth because they don't want you to leave. So the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses claim to be directly appointed by God. They are visible representatives of Jesus Christ. That would make them the highest authority on earth. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, jw.org, is their mouthpiece. So therefore we can test their fruit and their teachings to see if it's valid. Alright, so let's start. Let's look a bit about history. And does the history add up? Does the history make sense? So how did the governing body gain total authority over Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs and its members? How did that come about? Well, if we look at the history, we see there's problems. So at Matthew 24:45, Jesus speaks of a servant appointed by a master to give food at the proper time. So who is that servant? And why is this important? Because that servant, according to Jesus, will be appointed over all his belongings. So the governing body are saying, they are the faithful and discreet slave. They are the servant that is giving the proper food at the proper time, directly appointed by Jesus Christ to do this. So does that claim add up? So when Jesus asked who really is, how do we understand that question? You see, it's not about who as in a person. Rather, it's a test of faithfulness, not an identification statement. It's proven by the fact when it's the faithful and discreet slave, and Jesus also gives an example of an evil slave. What can help us to understand this? Well, imagine here's a general, and he asks the question, who has what it takes to become a leader? He's looking for someone to appoint him as leader of the platoon. And so then he's not looking for a name of a person. He's looking for the qualities. In other words, faithfulness, steadfastness. And so he might give you clues as to who will pass and who will fail. Now that's exactly what Jesus did. When he identified the faithful and discreet slave and he compared it to an evil slave. He's not looking for names and as a person. Right? So when we understand that, how can then the governing body make this claim that they are this one and that Jesus has appointed them? So to help us to understand if their claim is false, in Matthew 24, Jesus asks the question who? Then he answers the same question by when. So when we understand when, we can see that if their claim to who is valid. So let's look at when. Who is the servant then? According to Jehovah's Witnesses, this has changed. From the 1800s to 1920, it was an individual, Charles Taze Russell. But unfortunately, he died. Therefore, the spiritual food no longer existed. So it had to change. So from 1920 to 2012, it was a collective group of all anointed Christians on earth, the 144,000. Now the problem arose that I could also claim to be one of the 144,000 and contradict the governing body. So then, who be the faithful servant then? So they changed that from 2012 to our present day. It's only the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. So this means then that Charles Taze Russell and all of those anointed ones before the present day governing body members were not the faithful and discreet slave. You need to understand it. It's not them. It's only the present, current governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, when did Jesus appoint them according to them? Was in 1919. Well, then you have a problem. If Jesus appointed the governing body in 1919, how can it take 93 years for the governing body to understand that appointment? Something's wrong. It's not possible. To illustrate the point, a captain doesn't discover his authority decades later. If he does, he wasn't appointed, he assumes control. As a captain of a ship, if he captains that ship for 20 years, and then one day says, I've just realized that I was appointed 20 years ago. Because if the owner of the ship appointed him as captain, he would have known from the get-go. Now what happens if this captain of the ship, this pirate, dies, and they appoint a new captain? Authority doesn't travel back in time. A captain is appointed when he starts, not 50 years before he was born. Do you see the problem? These are new appointed governing body members, right? How exactly did Jesus appoint them 50 years before they were even born? It's not possible. So they will say, no, Jesus didn't appoint them. He appointed the body. Well, that doesn't add up either. Why? Let's have a look at that. Having a governing body means that Jesus isn't governing Jehovah's Witnesses. So here's a horse. Who is riding the horse? It's the headless rider. He's the governing body of that horse, not the head. Now, the Bible tells us that the head of every man and that of Christians is Jesus Christ. So you can't have a governing body. It doesn't add up. The Jehovah's Witnesses watchtower is full of self-validating logic. We are the faithful slave because we provide the truth. And how do you know it's a truth? Well, we know it's a truth because we are the faithful slave. And you're not allowed to question what they say is the truth. And therein is the problem. So, what if Jesus was referring to the governing body as a whole? Well, it still doesn't add up. Why? The group known as the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses wasn't formally established as a distinct, clearly defined leadership until 1971. So there are 52 years between 1919 and 1971. How can Jesus appoint you to the body in 1919, but the body only existed in 1971? So we still have this headless governing body of this horse, and it's separated from Jesus Christ. It simply doesn't add up. Because why would Jesus appoint a governing body if he's governing Christians? It simply doesn't make sense. So remember then that all the previous people appointed to the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not part of the governing body. They are not the faithful slaves. So then why would Jesus appoint them in that position, as they claimed, between the 1800s and 2012? How could Jesus appoint them to a position that didn't exist and what they were saying and what they were teaching wasn't valid? Do you understand that problem? Think about it. Let that sink in. It simply doesn't add up. How could Jesus appoint them to a position if that position wasn't valid, according to the witnesses' understanding since 2012 till today? How did these early anointed Christians get in that position of control and authority? So, what did Jesus say? He said, when he returns and he finds his servant working, then he'll appoint them. So, it can't be then Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, and Jesus' apostles, because they died before 1919. They died before the present-day governing body existed. So according to the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, the faithful slave isn't Jesus' apostles, it's them. And they were appointed in 1919. Does that make sense to you? No, it doesn't. And it doesn't make sense because it's not true. They're lying to you. It's as simple as that. So the governing body is smoke and mirrors. Let's look at Anthony Morris. He was appointed to the governing body in 2005. He was quietly removed in 2023. So how did Jesus cancel his appointment? If that appointment was made in 1919 or in 2005, how did he get kicked out of the temple? Because he's supposed to be a pillar in that temple. So what they're saying just simply doesn't add up. So, Jesus asks the question, who? Then he answers the same question, when? Now, when we understand when the appointment was made, it will help us to understand who it is, because it's in the same passage of Scripture in Matthew 24. So to help us understand something important. When? So in Luke 19, Jesus gives a parable of the minas. He was made king, he returned. When he returned, he said, well done, my good servant. Take charge of 10 cities. They were appointed. The good servant was appointed. When was that? Well, according to Matthew 26:64, Jesus is speaking to Caiaphas. He says to Caiaphas, from now on you will see the Son of Man at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. When? During the lifetime of Caiaphas. The appointment was made, according to Jesus Christ, when Caiaphas was still alive. Do you understand the problem? that this portion of Scripture in Matthew 26 raises serious doubts as to the claims of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. So, Matthew 24. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things happen." What things? The appointment of the faithful and discreet slave is part of these things. So when was it going to be appointed? In the lifetime of Jesus' apostles. Matthew, Mark, James, Peter, John, Jude. James writes in James 5, "The presence of the Lord is drawn close. The judge is standing before the doors." When? In his lifetime. In this generation. The generation of people that Jesus was speaking to that were alive at that time. Not 2,000 years later, or not in 1919 as the governing body claimed. Do you see the problem? That the claims of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses simply do not add up and don't tie into what Jesus said. Who would you say was going to be those of Jesus' apostles? Right, so according to the governing body, the faithful slave isn't the apostles. Because remember, they died before 1919. They died 2,000 years early. Does it make sense to you? No, it doesn't. So, let's just reason on things logically. So it's time to test the fruit. If it's from Jesus Christ, it can only be good. Remember, it can't be good and bad, because remember the tree in the Garden of Eden, if you eat from that tree, you die. So the governing body can mix up their bad with some good scriptures. Nevertheless, you eat from it, you believe it, you still die. And so the lesson is that you must follow Jesus Christ directly. So let's reason on that. Jesus would never send you a governing body that's going to give you good and bad fruit. It's simply not going to happen. So, let's reason and think about this. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. You drink direct from the source according to John 4, verse 14. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses claim to channel the truth. So it's a medium or a channel, or a channeler, is someone who claims to communicate with spirits or unseen entities. So that's a red flag. Now, when we compare what Jesus said, is the life-giving waters channeled to you, or do you drink directly? No, according to John, you drink directly. John 7:37-38. "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, out of his own heart will flow rivers of living water." Not from a watchtower, not from a governing body, not from channeled water. Jesus is the rock. You drink directly from that rock, from him. Remember the nation of Israel in the wilderness? When the rock split open, the water came out. They drank directly from that water. The water wasn't channeled through Moses or through anybody else. The rock is Jesus Christ. You drink directly from that rock. So the channeled waters, you don't know where it comes from. That water could be polluted. As some Romans alluded to that as a gushing sewer. It was full of human and animal waste. People who drank from it got sick. They couldn't even bath in that water. That's the problem with channeled water. It gets polluted. But when you drink directly from this life-giving waters that Jesus Christ provides, it will bubble forth in your heart and produce life-giving truth. That's the difference. So, when did Jesus become king? According to the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus became king in 1914. And they will say, well, Jesus sat at the right hand of God until 1914. So where do they get that from? Now, according to Jesus, he became king after his resurrection. This is recorded at Matthew 28:18, when he said, all authority has been given me in heaven and on earth. Now, Psalm 110 verse 1 says, sit at my right hand and until I place your enemies as a stool for your feet. means sit at my right hand on your throne as king. It doesn't mean that Jesus had to sit at God's right hand and not be king. That's not what it's saying. When God said, sit at my right hand, that was his enthronement as king. The waiting period until his enemies were subdued. Not wait until he became king in 1914. It's not what it's saying. He actively rules during opposition. He's going to rule in the midst of his enemies. Right? They'll say, well, he ruled in the midst of his enemies since 1914. No. From when he sat down as King of Kings. Jesus' final victory, it doesn't matter what period of time that it happens in after the fact, because he's still ruling as King of Kings to this day. Now, this raises other problems. The governing body are self-proclaimed experts with over 100 years experience, but they still can't get the basic scriptures right. How does that work? How is this possible? Now, in Mark 9 and in Matthew 16, Jesus says, there are some of those standing here who will not taste death at all until first they see the kingdom of God already having come in power. Who was he talking to? The people who were standing there listening to him. Not talking to me and you 2,000 years later or 1,000 years later. Some of his listeners would still be alive when they see him coming in kingdom power. So the witnesses will say, or the governing body will say, no, he was talking about his transfiguration, which happened a few days later. No, he wasn't. Was Jesus expecting the majority of his listeners to die within the next week? No. So he wasn't talking about the transfiguration. He was clearly saying that there were some of those who were standing there listening to him would see him return in kingdom power, and he would execute judgment on all the nations at that time. So there was a destruction that occurred on Jesus' return. The temple was destroyed at that time. The temple is destroyed today. We don't even know where it is. It's not the Wailing Wall, because they lied about where Jerusalem is. Right, so Jesus returned. He took the chosen ones with him. That's why Paul said, brothers, I don't want you to be ignorant of the fact. Right. But we, the living, will meet the ones that are resurrected. He was talking about those who are going to rule with Jesus and meet him in the air. Because some of them would still be alive. And who was Paul writing to? People 2,000 years later, or to the people who were reading his letter? No, people reading his letter. So they're lying. So, let's reason on this logically about Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ claimed to be the Messiah, it's a claim. He is the one chosen and authorized by God to fulfill that role as the Messiah. Jesus Christ. Christ means anointed one. Now in Matthew 24:45, Jesus says, look out, that nobody misleads you, for many will come on the basis of my name. What name is that? The Christ, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. What does Christ mean? It means chosen one, anointed one. The governing body are fulfilling that prophecy when Jesus said, watch out for these same ones. Governing body is saying, we're the chosen ones, we're the anointed ones. Jesus said, watch out for them. Don't go with them. Because they've got this new light. So why is this new light a problem? The governing body are keeping Jehovah's Witnesses in dense darkness and then providing this light that they're producing, and they're saying that Jesus gave them the light. Why is this a problem? Do you understand why? Jehovah's Witnesses don't understand the simple statement of Jesus Christ. I'm going to show you what that statement is. So what we have is the emergence of a tyrannical order of Freemasons. They're hiding the fact of their origins, and they are not who they claim to be. They are not the brothers of Jesus Christ. They are not those who are ruling with kings with Jesus Christ, because those ones are already there and have been there for more than 1,000 years. So what is that simple statement that Jehovah's Witnesses don't understand? there's Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the light of the world. The sheep follow that light. You can't have a new light. If Jesus is the light, He is the light. If they give you new light, that new light is fake. It's from another source. It's satanic. Understand this simple statement. The new light is in direct opposition to Jesus Christ because He is the light of the world. So understand that. Now let's look at some of Jesus' other simple things that He taught us. Jesus said, there's the broad and spacious road that many were walking on, and it was going to lead to destruction. Jehovah's Witnesses are very proud of their broad and spacious headquarters. But Jesus said it's a narrow door that you have to go through because He is the door. There's only one of Him. You don't need a big corporation. You don't need big churches. You don't need big organizations. There's just a small door, which is Him. He's the only door there is. You knock on that door, you enter through Him. Jesus Christ is the narrow door. Shows you that we're not talking about joining religions, because those religions can't be true simply because Jesus is the door. Now, Jesus says something else that's important. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, understand this simple thing. Jesus says, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in another way, that man is a thief. What does that mean? Well, if Jesus is the door, Jesus won't allow the wolf in through the door. He'll only allow the sheep in through the door. That is why the wolf must go another way. So if you're in a congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're a young little sheep, and you're being sexually molested by the elders, that means the wolf came through the door. But according to Jesus, that's not possible. That means the room you are in, or the religion you are in, isn't run and controlled by Jesus Christ, because Jesus wouldn't let the wolf in the door. That is why the wolf had to climb in a different way. And so you cannot be in this true religion. You cannot be in the truth under the leadership of Jesus Christ, who is the good shepherd. How can Jesus be the good shepherd and the sheep are being molested? It's not possible. So, truly, truly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. Not pastor. It's not a church, it's pasture. Understand the difference. There's no religious leaders. There are no priests. Priests can't save you. Pastors can't save you. Only Jesus Christ can save you. So it's the person of Jesus Christ, not a governing body, not an organization, not a religion. Jesus is the light. You enter through Him. He is the door. So I'm hoping that you understand this. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, or you're studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, that when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me. The except means that there can't be a governing body. What does except mean? Understand what that word except means. It means that there can't be a governing body. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's only one door. There isn't an organization door that you have to go through. So, let's look at the similarities between the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Jewish system of things at the time when Jesus was on earth. It was a control system built on a false identity, and it only works when people don't verify their authority. Jesus questioned their authority, exposed the lies, and so people started following Jesus and left the Jewish religions. That's why they hated Him. So they didn't reject God outright, they just repositioned themselves as the chosen leaders that you couldn't question. So we see the same situation with Jehovah's Witnesses and the governing body. It's a control system built on a false identity. The governing body present themselves as something credible, an insider, or even a chosen one of Jesus Christ. No, it's borrowed authority. They attach themselves to something already respected, Jesus Christ and His faithful slave, the apostles. The faithful slaves were the apostles, right? Not the governing body. What's recorded by the apostles in the Bible, you don't need new information from them. Just go and read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, 1 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, James, Jude. It's already been written there. You don't need new books, new light. You don't need a new Bible. It's already there. It's recorded. Go read it. So they control the information and they create a dependency. So the dependency is only, it's the truth, only they understand it, right? You need their approval. You need to hear a well done from them. But no, the well done is from Jesus Christ, not from a governing body. So the governing body hates you and they say you're no good and you're disfellowshipped. Jesus says, well done. And the direction comes from Jesus Christ. The governing body says, don't act unless you hear it from us. If we tell you it's okay, it's okay. These are all red flags. They're all indications that the governing body are lying and they're not who they say they are. Identity entanglement. Remember, the Jewish leaders at that time, you had to be identified as a Jew, a Judean, a Levite, or from the tribe of Benjamin, because they lived in Jerusalem. Those are the only three tribes. So they had to be entangled in that identity, because then they were still God's chosen people. The 10 tribes were rejected as Samaritans. So the problem comes in as a Jehovah's Witness, right? If the governing body are wrong, it's hard for them to understand or to accept the fact that they've been deceived. It's hard for them to grasp that fact. So there's control through fear or reward, right? Fear is you're going to be disfellowshipped, you're going to lose out on everlasting life. God is going to punish you, the ground will open up and swallow you up like it did with those called a Dathan and Abiram. And it's a lie. And the reward is, well, you're going to live, have everlasting life in paradise. The governing body can't offer you that. Only Jesus Christ can. You don't need them if you've got Jesus Christ and you're following Him. So through their control and through the system that they develop, in a later point in time, the control is largely internal. Jehovah's Witnesses enforce it on themselves. That's why it becomes so hard for them to break free from the lies. So it's Jehovah's Witness truth or the uncomfortable truth. And here's the difficult thing. That a person controlled needs to verify that reality independently. And it's hard for someone who's being controlled to do that. And you need to do that to break free from it. So the governing body's fake authority collapses fast under honest scrutiny. And the watchtower system of control survives because Jehovah's Witnesses hesitate to apply honest scrutiny. They don't want to be honest with themselves and say, well, the governing body just made mistakes, they're human. They make all sorts of excuses, and while they're making that excuses, they've been controlled and misled. So, I'm hoping that the information that we've discussed and that I've shown you, the scriptures, and some of the inconsistencies that simply don't add up with what they're teaching people, that when you look at this, you will ask these questions. My advice to you is that you need to pray directly to Jesus Christ. Remember, Jesus Christ has been appointed as King of Kings. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Him by His Father. He sits at the right hand of God. Therefore, it's entirely appropriate for you to pray directly to Jesus Christ. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you, no, that's idolatry. Where in the Bible does it say that? Jesus Christ, when He said, continue, come to me and knock on the door because I'm the door. How else are you going to knock on that door if you don't talk to Jesus Christ? Explain that to me. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses don't think about it, that for me to knock on that door and for Jesus to open that door, I have to actually speak to Him directly. For Jesus to know me, I must be speaking directly to Him. Otherwise, He will say on Judgment Day, I don't know you. Who are you? Where do you come from? By then it's too late. So my advice to you, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, Pray directly to Jesus Christ. Ask Him to open your eyes and to help you to see the truth about this religion and about the governing body. And He will. So be prepared for what Jesus Christ reveals to you. Cheers and thanks for watching.